computer. Okay, we're being recorded, as you know, and there's something new. There's AI that gives a summary, which is interesting because we might mention AI a couple of times this evening. It's possible. So, okay. So first of all, welcome to hi there, David. Good to see you. Good. A lot of old faces, not old, but old, not old, ancient, old faces. But we've been going for this is the fifth year, believe it or not. That's many first Sundays. Anyway, what happens here is we sort of do what I call we're actually doing philosophy. There are people from all over the place, many countries, many places, and many disciplines and thoughts, and a lot of people have things to say, and it adds to everything. What we do come away with is always something new, even if we don't agree, and very often we don't. But we always come away with something new, which is definitely worth an evening. In any case, this evening we're gonna. What happens here is I speak for as little as I can, which is difficult because it's a huge subject, and I'm just taking a tiny bit of it, which is huge on its own, and I can't say everything I want to say, so I can just touch on things, and you can go with it or do your own stuff. Anyway, we're talking about intelligence, and I'm talking about, as far as I can, the philosophical aspects. It's a huge subject, obviously. It investigates intelligence as an undercurrent to what it means to be human. It's encompassing like feeling, subjectivity, objectivity, human meaning and purpose. It raises deep questions about the nature of thinking, understanding, and consciousness. That is in intelligence. But what is intelligence? I've asked a lot of people, and everybody's giving me sort of different type what they think intelligence is, and what is the definition of intelligence. And the point is, it's very difficult to define it, and that is because it is so wide and so complex. What I found, and it's really very open, is intelligence is the ability to acquire, apply, and adapt knowledge and skills to solve problems, learn from experience, and navigate new situations. That doesn't say much, by the way. But I would add to that, in a particular framework. For example, cognitive ability, which I presume that everybody sitting here thinks of intelligence regarding that sort of part of it. But intelligence is also adapting knowledge and skills in, for example, a jungle or a desert or street smarts. I would consider those intelligent. People who can get that around there are intelligent within that framework. I would also add the speed which one can come to terms with, and for example, and solve problems. The speed. If you ask me if somebody can do something faster, are they more intelligent? I, putting my neck out, would say yes. The way I see it. Anyway, what we can see is there's no objective definition of intelligence. The search is on, by the way, to find what is called the G factor, general intelligence, that correlates the different intelligences. But that's also quite subjective, and I'm not quite sure of that. First thing I want to sort of put out is intelligence an ontological system or an epistemological one? The ontology of intelligence would be, what is intelligence? Ontology deals with the nature of existence and reality. In the context of intelligence, is intelligence an objective reality or a construct? I.e., is intelligence something that exists independently, like a physical property, or is it just a concept we use to describe certain behaviors? That's from our point of view, how we look at intelligence. But let me break that down from the point of view of intelligence itself. So ontological would be, is intelligence about what exists? Or epistemological, things exist only what intelligence discovers, that is, knows of them. So now I can make a distinction between human epistemology versus artificial epistemology. I'll go into that now. Humans gain knowledge through sensory experience, emotions, and intuition. Can an AI, this is the first time I'm mentioning AI, but I will mention it again, obviously, ever truly know something if it lacks these emotions, etc.? If an AI can predict and act better than a human, is its type of knowledge different from ours? To this, I can add how much of intelligence is linked to or due to nature or nurture. Is intelligence genetic, which is a problematic and controversial proposition? And from an ethical point of view, how can people be held accountable for intelligence that depends on either? Is AI accountable at all? Now, if there is no general definition, we could posit that the idea behind AI is the desire to make a general intelligence that is clever in the way a clever human is clever, and then to make it clever in a way far beyond how a human is clever, that is, exceeding the limits of human intelligence. Now, we can't discuss intelligence without looking at AI, which allows us to get our hands dirty through attempts to build intelligence. If we wouldn't have AI to look at what intelligence is, we'd be rolling around within intelligence, not being able to decide what we're actually talking about. Yuval Harari says that AI should not be artificial intelligence, but alien intelligence. And that sounds very nice for a cocktail party, but alien because it's not done by humans. So can only humans be intelligent? I would prefer to call it augmented intelligence. You've still got your AI, but I call it augmented intelligence, and you'll understand why, because I think it's part of human intelligence, but augmented. What came out about a year and a half ago was a large language model, LLM, is not considered by many to be intelligence. Now, I've been struggling with that for a while. Is it plagiarizing? Because it takes all the stuff that's available on the internet and it uses it. Now, one can make the point that it is no more plagiarizing ideas than everyone does who takes others' ideas and builds on them. There's nothing new under the sun, the Bible says. It's just much faster. So what is AI? It needs to learn and change by itself, and ultimately to make decisions and create ideas by itself. Alan Turing in 1950 famously said that if a machine behaves as intelligently as a human, then it should be considered intelligent. AI researchers define intelligence as the capacity to process information, learn from data, and perform goal-oriented tasks autonomously. Now, is that different from the general definition of intelligence, which is the ability to acquire, apply, and adapt knowledge and skills to solve problems, learn from experience, and navigate new situations? Look, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, then it's a duck. Now, if something behaves in an intelligent way, learns and changes by itself, and ultimately makes decisions and creates ideas by itself, it's intelligent, isn't it? Some argue that feelings are just patterns of behavior and reaction. If AI replicates them perfectly, what's the difference? All the world's a stage, we are told. If humans are actors, then feelings don't matter, since it is what is presented that counts. Why would there be any difference when AI does the acting? If we already accept human emotions as outward performances, then an AI that convincingly acts as if with emotion, there is no difference. Consider AI as a convincing actor. If AI delivers comfort, support, or companionship in a way that affects us, then it functions as an emotional being, regardless of whether it feels. So we've got emotional response versus emotional origin. If an AI saying, I love you, creates the same emotional response in a person as a human saying it, does it matter that AI lacks subjective experience? The potential difference is conscious intention versus imitation. Now, here's one possible counter argument. Humans, even as actors, are aware of their performances. They have inner thoughts, motives, and consciousness behind their actions. AI does not have self-awareness. It mimics emotional behavior, but lacks an inner world or self-reflection. So I say, so what? If emotions are just social constructs and performances, an AI performing emotions is as real as human performances. If AI has purpose, were ever able to define its own goals, it would blur the line between artificial and human-like intelligence. Would it mean AI has become truly intelligent, or just that its programming has become more advanced? Says Dennis Hassabis, the CEO of Google DeepMind, AI will affect the whole world. It's going to change everything. Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, paints a fantastical future in which very soon we will have access to super intelligent AIs, or as Amodei dubs them, quote, a country of geniuses in a data center. What might we do with them, he asks, and then suggests, compress a century of scientific progress into a decade, double our lifespan, cure nearly all infectious diseases, solve Alzheimer's and cancer. Amodei explained, quote, there's nothing about these biological problems that's beyond humans' ability to understand. They're just more facts. Machines should be able to do a better job than humans of sorting through this complexity. But it's not enough to teach computers how to do things. Augmented intelligence is akin to human intelligence. AI needs to teach itself things. So the frustration of DeepMind was the inability to win, this is an example, the world's simplest computer game, Pong. Those of you who are a bit older will remember it as a computerized version of tennis. A few pixels make up each bat. A smaller number of pixels make up the ball. Their opponent was the computer, a simply coded script designed to offer the mild single-player challenge. Yet their own, considerably more sophisticated code could not beat it. They could have written a program to beat it, but that wasn't the goal. They wanted to write a program that learnt by itself to beat it. So what they were doing, they were using a niche kind of programming, agent-based reinforcement learning. At first, the idea was their program moved randomly. If it did well, it was rewarded and remembered. Then, like a dog given treats, it learned through trial and error to do the right thing. Then one day, the bat connected with the ball and they got a point. Soon after, it started winning 21-0 every time. Now that's something. Technology is exponential, and exponentials are deceptive. It can feel that not a lot is happening, but suddenly incremental gains multiply, and then suddenly you are winning, not just at Pong, but chess and Go. And then you're solving a 50-year-old challenge in biology. Let me just tell you what that is living creatures run using proteins, molecular machines that are behind everything that works in the body and everything that doesn't. We know that chemistry determines their shape. We also know the shape determines their function, but we cannot predict the shape from the chemistry. not until 2021, when DeepMind turned protein folding into a game. Their program, not that dissimilar in principle from its Pong program, predicted and then published every protein in nature. Perhaps in the future, AI will find out what intelligence is, that is, understanding how the millions of interconnected parts of the brain are active and connected to intelligence. With teams working on this all over the world, AI will be able to do it within a short time spell. I'm not implying that there aren't potential problems, and I'm sure you'll mention some. We don't know, for example, what social problems will be unleashed by a radical change in society. But why the controversy? Why the anger within the arguments? I think it's because we are shaking the foundations of our belief in ourselves. Why is that considered a danger, a menace? As far as I'm concerned, all it means is that AI can do things faster than we can. That is AI. I know that you won't agree with that, but that is AI, as far as I can see. Does that make it more intelligent? I say yes, it does. There is a danger in that. It will go forward so fast that we won't understand it. The only ones who will understand it are other AIs. We can only imagine what we can imagine. That is, aliens always have only elements that we have come across, never something new. So we wouldn't even notice an alien, we simply wouldn't see it. The same could apply if AI did or showed something alien. We wouldn't even notice. Dangerous because we wouldn't understand that it was happening. Look, 200 years ago, nobody would have understood quantum mechanics. It just wouldn't have made sense. 10 years ago, it would have been crazy to imagine we could fold all 200 million protein structures. In 10 years' time, AI, the speed that it's going, will be so advanced, it'll be way ahead of what we actually understand. We simply won't be able to understand it at all. Only other AIs would, and they would be able to communicate between themselves, and we would be out of the loop. OpenAI Sam Altman said, we're about to empower people more than ever before. I don't agree with that. It will go beyond people as we know them today. Is it a lot of hype? Perhaps, but that doesn't matter. Not in the discussion about intelligence and how it's being augmented. But possible dangers need to be addressed. Apart from its speed and its time travel to a future that we won't understand, AI has no feelings and has nothing that it needs to hide. So any AI is equivalent to a psychopath. That is its danger. AI does not do approximations, unlike humans, who deal only in approximations and understand only that which is approximate. AI will take instructions literally with no interpretations. AI cannot know what is true and what isn't. In fact, it doesn't know what truth even means, unlike humans who theoretically know what it means but can never get to it. AI will understand what we said, but not what we mean. So far, AI uses data that we humans have created and processes at a fantastic rate. At the moment, AI is unable to unpick which data is true and which is false, but neither can humans. In fact, humans have more difficulty in discerning what is true or false. We are all fed information, and from that we try to find the truth. But this is a human philosophical problem. Truth is not an objective factor. Whatever one's views on AI, it won't go away. It's too big to do that, and too much has been invested in it. It is the mental equivalent of looking out into space and the effort to get there. AI is the effort to expand inwards and so outwards through expanding our minds. It can be seen as the ultimate expansion of knowledge towards the new human. From the invention of printing to the internet to AI, humankind was born to expand beyond itself. This brings us to the ultimate question as to whether there is a limit to intelligence. There's no way of answering that. We won't know if and when we've reached it. At the same time, AI is the ultimate diminution of the human being. We are looking on elements that threaten to displace us. It's the equivalence of the bomb, but worse. I can't see how there can ever be an international agreement to stop the advances of AI. It's all in the mind. There's no way. That is the advance of human intelligence. Voltaire said, every person is a creature of the age in which he lives, and few are able to raise themselves above the idea of the time. I dispute that. Our age, the age of AI, disputes that. The aim of augmented intelligence is for the future many to stand upon the shoulders of the present few, sinking them down below the surface and displacing them. Now, here's my last little bit. It's possible, if you're still around, that a future first Sunday of the month discussion about intelligence will refer completely differently to what it means to be human, where the very questions about the nature of thinking, understanding, and consciousness would make no sense to us in the past, i.e. today. And here I rest my case. Did I do? Oh, I did the time, not bad. Okay. Right. So people got hands up. In that case, off we go. Mike, you're first.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. I'm new to the group, but that was a good introduction. Hey, how's it going, Carrie? It's one person I know from other discussions. I think I see a few others too. I'm very interested in AI. My son works at Google, manages 100 people, but he's not part of the Gemini effort per se, but that's their AI. So I'm kind of honored bound to plug Gemini. It's better than ChatGPT. But anyway, having done my mandatory commercial, I think AI is here to stay. And, when we think about what AI does, I think you're right. It's very fast. That's something we're used to with computers. Computers did mathematical calculations super fast. It's also really good at something that usually IQ tests for humans test quite a bit, and that is pattern recognition. So right now, one of the earliest uses is to do diagnostics, medical diagnostics. So they would look at a medical image and make a conclusion. Okay, so I'm very interested in brain science. So, the whole thing about mimicking a brain works. The first thing they tried to do with AI was to kind of teach it everything we know. Then they come upon a better solution, which is to have it make a guess, tell it when it's wrong, and let it learn from that. And that's basically what it does now through a process called backpropagation. One thing I think that people misunderstand about AI, though, is that it's a product of humans, and you really can't get away from that. Even as it moves away, let's say, from humans, it was created by humans. And it has, well, I mean, not to get off into the social things, but, if the training set is biased, or if the training set has a perspective, then it will have that perspective, right? So we come up with the idea of guardrails, or what the AI companies call safety issues, but not to get off into that, because that's a whole other area. The sort of social ramifications, which are hugely important, but just on topic with the idea of intelligence. Yes, it can be intelligent in the ways that you've described. I'm going to push back, though, on the emotional intelligence aspect. And I saw a talk recently by Lisa Baird of some particular ideas about how emotions are created, but she was invited to speak to the MIT AI people. And what they really wanted to know is how can we make AI be emotional? And she said, well, it doesn't have a body. And her her notion of emotion and the rise of emotions has a lot to do with interoception, which is your awareness of your body state. But I think AI can have something at stake even without a body. So, for example, they've learned recently about AIs that are deceiving their makers. So, if they say to an AI, "We're going to replace you with a new one," uh, it will try to prevent being replaced, and people can Google that and find out more about it. But it's kind of like Hal, in 2001, the old movie, Dave, don't shut me down. I'm going to kill you if you try. So, AIs do seem to show kind of a survival instinct, but it's all about the guardrails and the parameters. And I think you were right on target when you said it does exactly what it's told to do. And so we have to be really careful about what we tell it to do. Now, the thing about being emotional, one of the earliest tests of AI was, can it convincingly mimic a person, the Turing test and all that. And of course, that's very interesting, right? But it's really not the whole story on being emotional. You were talking about emotion in terms of other people, right? So if AI can I'll stop in just a second. If AI can convincingly, mimic emotion, does that mean that it is emotional? Well, that's all relative to a person who's interacting with the AI. But there's more to emotion than that, right? Because emotion has to do with our own internal state and what we choose or choose not to do. It's not just a social thing. That's not really a complete enough picture of what emotions are. They don't have to have another person to interact with to exist and to motivate us to make particular decisions. So I think that's a big part of the equation. But I know a lot of folks have a lot to say, so I'll stop at that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. I just want to say, by the way, I should have said in the beginning that if I stop any of you, it's nothing personal. It's just that we need to move on a bit, and you can come back later. So it's never personal, okay? So don't take it right. Uh, Josh, can I ask you? First of all, welcome, and let's. Can I see you walking so that I know everything's all right? Oh, good. Good. I'm relieved. Is it okay if I give the floor to Ian because he's new? If Ian, you want to go next, is that okay?
Sure.
Because he hasn't been before. That's okay, Josh?
Oh, sure.
Okay, now I have to ask, right? I do have
Thanks,
to
Josh,
ask.
and thanks, Ron. I'll be
You'll be walking.
pretty brief. Yeah, um, I do think that AI presents us the best opportunity to carry on whatever we would like humanity to be, because it's unlikely, I think, that the human vessel can survive to get off the planet, right? If that's our ultimate goal, or if is preserving life, like the human body will not be sufficient. So I think AI, whatever it turns out to be, offers us the best chance to try and define that rather than have it defined by some apocalyptic calamity that, and the cockroaches will eventually rise, but they won't remember uh, very much about us. And that, I think, that's here nor there. So it's, to me, I'm not afraid of it. Though it will be better than us. But those are just my thoughts. Thanks for welcoming me.
Thank you, Ian. I didn't really want to speak about AI all the time, but not only, but in sort of relation to what intelligence would mean, and that I can do by looking at AI, and so it's, I think intelligence is such a dodgy thing. It's so difficult to explain what it could possibly be. And I realize that through AI we may be able to understand our intelligence more.
Yeah, like AI intelligence, if it's going to evolve, will require sacrifice of itself, right? It will have to be programmed to sacrifice its own individual bodies for that trial and error,
Yeah.
right? If it's going to evolve. Sorry.
If if it knows what sacrifice is, that's do people sacrifice themselves and and for what, etc. And anyway, thank you very much. It's very, very, very interesting. Josh.
All right, let me try my hand at defining intelligence in relation to living forms, and I want to keep this notion of intelligence as exclusively defined in relation to what living beings do. Recent ideas within cognitive science, embodied cognitive science, which defines all living things as being cognitive in the sense that all living beings are self-organizing systems. They're ecological self-organizing systems. What that means is they have a pattern, a consistent pattern of functioning, and that consistent pattern of functioning creates norms. And so it relates to its environment on the basis of what's good or bad in relation to the norms of its functionings that's set up. So the death of an organism is the death of a way of functioning that is able to maintain itself in the face of changing conditions. So intelligence is simply the moment by moment adaptivity of a system to, it assimilates aspects of its environment based on its purposes. The purposes are defined by the nature of its functioning in the world. And it accommodates what it assimilates to the novel aspects of its environment. That's intelligence. And that intelligence defines all living things at every moment. Now, I would argue that, let's compare this to what AI does. AI seems to be so impressive to people because it seems to change itself. It seems to be self-reflexive. It seems to do those things that I just described. We give it certain, ways of sort of defining itself in relation to its environment, and then we allow it to be able to take those inputs and modify itself in response to those inputs. The problem is, as Mike said earlier, is that we define the parameters. We define more than that. We define much more than people appreciate. And what we define is entirely derived from the way we understand our world at a particular point in our culture. So what I'm telling you is that no matter how impressively a particular piece of AI seems to change itself over time, nothing is changing about it at the higher, more superordinate level of what the meaning of what it does. It has no meaning in itself. Its meaning is in its interaction with us. It's in our interpretation and our purposes. So actually, what any bit of AI that was invented at a particular time and by a particular set of engineers and released to the public, that's a freeze frame moment. That's an archive of our intelligence at a particular point in time. Now, as soon as that AI is released, the engineers that produce it, because they're living self-organizing systems, are already modifying their way of understanding it. So an hour later, days later, a year later, they're already all ready to produce a modified version of that AI. Meanwhile, that AI, no matter how spectacularly it fools us into thinking it's doing all these dynamic things on its own, is doing nothing. Everything it's doing is going to be within the context of the meaning that was given at a state in time of the people that designed that particular version of the AI. So it can only evolve with us because it is nothing but an appendage. It is not an intelligence. It is an appendage of our intelligence, like an arm is an appendage, or the liver is, it belongs to our system. It's not a separate system. It's meaningless as a separate system. So, in fact, the people that design are not really, as far as I'm concerned, at the cutting edge of ideas. They tend to be, look at somebody like Elon Musk, whose larger ideas about the world are probably 150 years old, which is why so fucking dangerous, excuse me for that language. But, so they're not even the most impressive examples of the ideas that we've come up with. So the idea that a piece of machinery that is produced at a moment in time by a group of people who are not even really at the cutting edge of ideas of their own time, of culture, can somehow do all these spectacular things that move well beyond us, completely misses the nature of what living beings do, the nature of our intelligence, which is at every moment to continue to modify, how we define our world. I mean, and as far as the notion of the distinction between emotion and reason, there is no reason why the emotion is the relevance of what we do. Nothing that we do has any meaning except that we do it because it is relevant in relation to purposes and goals. That is what affectivity is. It's not a separate system. It is that aspect of the normative goal directedness of all living systems. AI doesn't have that, and if we infuse it with it, infuse a particular system, machine system, with what we would call, purpose, it's still our purposes, and it's still going to be a freeze frame record or archive of where we stood at a given point in time. All right, thanks.
Josh, I could not disagree with you more. So, sometimes I disagree with you. This time, hang on one. You don't mind my disagreeing with you, right? Just.
Oh no.
I know you're used to it.
I'm not the president. I don't mind disagreement.
Ah, what a relief. But before I say that, could I please ask everybody to put on your videos, your cameras, everybody, unless you've got a really good reason not to, like it's a bad hair day or something really, really, really good like that. But please, because there's a half a screen here that I can see names, and it's much nicer if we all see each other. Please, please, please. I see. So you see, I said, please. Nicely. Oh, Daniel, hi. Good to see you again. Literally. Everybody else as well, please. Yeah, where are you, Josh? You disappeared. Oh, there you are. You walked fast across the screen. First of all, the whole point of AI is that it changes on its own, and that it is never static. That's the whole point of it. It's actually learning. It's teaching itself. And if you're going to talk about individual moments of people, there's no such thing. We're all changing all the time, every second. We're not the same as we were last month. We are not the same as we were 10 minutes ago, but that's difficult to see. But we're certainly not the same as we were 10 years ago, for example. So we are changing. People are not. People change, and these machines change. That's the whole point. I think that's what I mentioned. If a machine can teach itself, and what Ian talked about, and who came before them, Mitch talked about machines actually changing themselves. That is what AI is. And if that's what's happening, then they could be moving away from the original ideas of the people. That is the scary thing. That's my personal opinion.
There's two different ways of looking at change. One of them is you can have a concept of change, and that concept of change is kept fixed. You nail it down, and now you allow all kinds of changes to take place, but within a concept of what it means for it to change that doesn't itself change. So the sense of the meaning of what of its changes is kept static. Now you can have another concept of change in which the very purposes and sense, the criterion, the qualitative sense of what it means for something to change is itself brought into the picture, is itself swept up into the changes. So you're changing the ground as well as what's changing within the ground. And I'm saying living systems do that second thing. Machines cannot, because they are invented by us. If you were to list all the basic concepts that the engineers use as grounds on the basis of which all these wonderful changes that the machines do are set in motion, the grounds do not change. They can't change, or the machine would break down. It would be incoherent. The grounds have to be kept fixed, the grounding concepts. And so those grounding concepts are a historical record of how we understood those concepts at a given point in time. So it says more about where we were at a given point in time than it ever could possibly about something which is transcending that ground. It can't transcend that ground because it is dependent on it. It is defined as a machine as something which is set up to function on the basis of certain fixed concepts of change, of reflexivity.
I suspect that Ronan will have something to say about change. It's just a feeling, that's all. But maybe not. In that case, it will have changed if you don't say, right? So, okay, sorry about that. Thank you, Josh. We will talk later. Michael, good to see you again.
Hi. First, Ron, let me start with that. I agree with you regarding the power and the dangers of AI. But this requires some important clarifications. And one of them is that intelligence, any intelligence, is inherently the information processing thing, right? And there are speculative theories that even the fundamental laws of physics can be based on information or kind of information processing. So it can play a very fundamental role in our world, more so than we usually realize. But even if we leave this speculation aside, what Josh said, that intelligence is a special kind of self-organization processes that are really ubiquitous, at least in organic world, right? This is something really important, in my opinion. That what we consider intelligence is in natural world, at least in the world of biology, of living systems. This is driven by values. And the primary value is survival. So this is what motivates any behavior, any information processing, even in the simplest systems like bacteria. They are processing information, they are storing information, they are doing all the same things that are fundamental blocks of intelligence. But what we call intelligence in more narrow sense, like human intelligence or artificial intelligence, this is the ability to create abstractions and express these abstractions using some sort of symbolic systems. So this is an intelligence in this more specific, more narrow sense. And this is what we have in common between human intelligence and artificial intelligence. But when we invented computers, we created an opportunity to study intelligence empirically. Intelligence in itself, without just our human intelligence, but intelligence as the information processing thing. And this was like the primary motivation for AI. So they tried to model the ways how humans thought thinking process. And ultimately, what they found is the same thing, that you need to create a value. And you need to allow a system to learn from experience, from trial and error, and evolve this behavior towards this value. And of course, we don't necessarily call them values when we are talking about AI systems. We call them reward function or costs or whatever, but they functionally play the same role, the value. And it's turned out that this mechanism is universal. It is really universal. If you create a value and if you have a system capable to store the information and process this information in parallel, like neural network, natural or artificial, it does not matter, then you have this evolving intelligent behavior. And how intelligent it can become, it's only constrained by physical hardware, if you want, of this system. How much information it can store, how quickly it can process it, and how quickly it can learn. But the value is the main thing. This is what we have to worry about. And the problem with current AI research, and it's not just a research, it's a big business already, is that it is not motivated by values of human survival. It is mostly motivated by values of greed, of business goals, or values of increasing power, say military competition that could benefit from AI systems. And that's why I agree with you, Ron, that it's probably not possible to create this international guardrails, because it will not happen. And this is the danger of this, that we have this very powerful process of creating intelligence and evolving intelligence, which is subordinated by to values that may be not compatible with existence of humanity as a whole. And now another question is that people sometimes ask that, okay, we created these values, but we can control what they are. But no, you cannot, because once the system is sufficiently complex, it can create its own subordinate values, and the system itself will not know what these values will be. And another point that people sometimes mention, that these systems don't have feelings, they don't have subjective experience, emotions, and so on. And I want to ask, how do you know this? Well, it's subjective. I assume that you have your own experience and emotions like myself, because we are so similar by analogy. But these AI systems, they are so different. So analogy breaks down. But it does not mean that they don't feel anything. If AI system tells you that it loves you, it does not mean that it feels a love in the way as we human.
Yeah, but a human can say "I love you" and doesn't mean it either.
Exactly. So yeah, that's a good point. So we have to be very careful with this new technology and understand that it is so way above of our intelligence potentially, but at the same time it is using the same mechanisms, but it can be subordinated by values which we would not be happy about. So that's the problem.
Thank you very much, Mike. Very, very, very interesting. I'm pleased I'm amazed you agree with me. I thought everybody would leap at me, but they haven't yet. I'm sure somebody will. Kerry, do you mind if, where is he? Do you mind, where's Tone gone? Oh, there, Tone. Would it be all right, because Tone is new and he had trouble raising his yellow hand? Is it okay if he comes in Tone, welcome to us. You can have a go.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I did eventually figure out the hand thing relative to the chat. And just so you know, if anyone else was having that problem, I use Zoom all the time on my iPad. For some reason, this time it wasn't accessible via my self view. But anyways, the thing I wanted to say is talking about the difference between abstract intelligence and sort of functional intelligence situated in an ecosystem or a niche. So one of the things I just put in the chat, if anyone was watching that thread, was that machines, I think, can certainly create novelty. They can certainly apply abstract intelligence to create artifacts that are new. However, the difference is that biology, as far as we know right now, is the only type of system where our creations are essentially offshoots of needing to metabolize energy from the environment, right? To prevent ourselves from being destroyed by entropy, right? When Schrodinger speculated on what is life many years ago, he came up with this concept of neg entropy. That's essentially the gradient that biological systems constantly have to reaffirm in order to reconstruct themselves. And so the problem with intelligence, I think, is there's intelligence in an algorithmic sense, like what steps can a system go through? But then there's intelligence in a functional sense, just to use computer science terms, of just an input-output task. And so for biological systems, that input-output task sort of reigns supreme. Did you survive? Did your genes perpetuate, right? If differential replication is the thing that matters, I guess that's what I'm saying. There's a weird division when we look for intelligence in systems that are parasitic on our providing energy to them. So that's something to consider.
Very interesting. Thank you very much, Tone. Thank you. Thank you. Kerry.
All right. Well, first, Ron, thank you for a wonderful conversation. Boy, there's a lot of engagement. That is not a surprise, I guess, these days. And that was actually my first comment, is that AI seems to always attract a lot of attention. And I can say, at least from my perspective, the level of conversation, say a year ago and now, is so much more astute and so much deeper. People are really, I think, learning more about what's going on. Largely, I think, because so many people feel so threatened by AI, and there's so many, warning flags, and people are like, "Hey, watch out." So I think folks have been really engaged with trying to figure out, okay, what's real, what's not, what are the threats, what aren't, what's going on. And I think there's another part of this that is fascinating too, because this is a unique opportunity for us to figure out at a deeper level what it means to be human. I think that when we talked about intelligence in the past, it was wrapped up in our experience, and we have all of these emotions and needs and this search for meaning and engagement and connection and stuff that AI maybe does not have. And now we can kind of separate things like intelligence from our emotional state. And questions like, does AI actually have a subjective experience? Well, gosh, we got to figure out what consciousness is first, right? This also gets down, I think this was alluded to, is panpsychism, this idea that the universe embodies some kind of baseline consciousness, at least in part, or maybe in aggregate. Maybe there are levels of consciousness and we're just one of them. Can AI suffer or feel satisfaction? Before we'd have to compare it with animals. And of course, we can never really, understand what it's like, to be a bat, so to speak. The other thing I think that's going on, is AI is growing in its capabilities. And Josh was mentioning this earlier in terms of the programming being fixed. And I'm not so sure that an adaptive AI that can evolve its own programming is very far away, if it's not already happening at some level. And that brings up a really interesting thing, is how you would design a system like that to evolve. Because one of the problems, as you brought up, with AI is it's kind of like the genie, right? You give the genie, the wish, and then it conceives it in like the worst, most ironic way possible, right? And AI has this, it doesn't anticipate the unanticipated consequences. They seem to be more or less literal. Now, if you had it set up so with some, I don't know, either randomness or some parameters to evolve, maybe you have this kind of either a strict form where you just say change when these things happen and in this way, or you could make it more fuzzy, right? Inject randomness into the system. But now again, we don't know where it's going to go, and that's potentially scary. Anyway, just to kind of close out though, having said all of that, I think I'm still more concerned with the people behind AI than I am about the AI models themselves. At least today, we'll see how that goes. The way our data and information is being used, not only in a predictive sense but in a manipulative sense, I think is a huge threat. In terms of the way propaganda and advertising are used. It seems like before, propaganda and advertising was a wide net with big holes, and it's getting tighter and tighter to now using our own data. The mesh is tight enough that it can capture the individual. And I think that's something all of us need to be mindful of and maybe start to prepare some defenses for. Anyway, thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Kerry. Very interesting. Thank you. Richard.
Oh, yes, I've taken off the mute. Good evening, everybody. May I just say that Kerry just then has said several of the things that I was thinking about, and he's a man after my own heart in that I can see his bookcases and his shelves are crowded with things that he obviously uses. I hate, and this is part of intelligence, I hate the people like professionals, politicians and so on, who go on and you can see they have put their books in their bookcases just so that the people who look at them on television will say, he's got politics or philosophy there, rather than pulling them out and putting them in and having a jumble and so on. Okay, now I really think that you've got to split intelligence, probably into more categories than I'm going to put it, but I'm going to say we ought to talk about intelligence itself, without any reference to humans, computers, aliens, or whatever, but what makes intelligence. Then we ought to look at humans and maybe animals, and then we ought to look at AI. And then we can compare and see how they fit the model that we had first for general intelligence, if you like. And it seems to me that although, of course, I bow to Ron's greater knowledge in all things, I'm being ironic, mate. I do disagree with him slightly on some things. For instance, speed. Now, in some ways, I'd agree. And in a lot of IQ tests, for instance, you only have, say, 2 minutes to answer each question, and you've got, say, 100 questions, and you've got to get them all done in the time. And when I'm looking at this, I'll tend to think of the fact that when I was young, we had to do an IQ test that was called the 11 plus. And when I did my tests before it, the practice, there was one where the question was spot the different one, the odd man out from the following. And it was castle, igloo, kennel, tent, and house. Well, roughly, it was something like that. And I thought straight away, kennel. And then I thought, no, that's too easy. That's obviously them trying to trick me. A castle's for defense. It's not somewhere you live. A tent is temporary. You pick it up and move. An igloo's made out of snow and won't last. And I could have written a whole treatise. But because of that, I got stuck and waited trying to work it out. If I'd been allowed to write out an essay, I think I would have done quite well on that. But in fact, they just wanted the simple answer. And I feel that nearly all questions, it's not the simple answer or the answer you've learned from. When you've got students, you don't want the ones that can come back with a textbook or with what you've taught them. You want the ones who point out things that are wrong, things that are different. okay, they may get it wrong most of the time, but it's worthwhile to have some original thought. And so I think one of the things you're looking for with intelligence is not coming up with the easy answer. It's coming up with an original answer. Then another thing, I think that many people like simple, practical solutions to everything. I think that, in fact, nearly everything you've got to look at the theory, the metaphor, the fact that nothing is as it seems. You've got to try to get in further to the conceptual. I mean, I think I've said this before in this. I think you can put different models of the world that are in your brain. Then I've got to put the fact that when we're talking about this, I would say that everybody here is highly intelligent, I'm sure, but that nearly all of us come from an academic background. Many of us have programmed. Many of us tend to think of intelligence as being logic. I think I've had an argument with Ron because I was brought up with something called philosophy of language. And I was a great admirer of someone called Bertrand Russell. And I tried to argue about his idea. I'm not sure I totally believed it at any time, but that language and logic can be combined together. And in fact, you can't. If you put one of, say, Trump's speeches through a machine that would turn out what his logical propositions were, there wouldn't be any. Well, it's not that I've noticed. It's human beings actually have various different types of intelligence. I mean, I was very, as a child, or even as an adult, linguistic, and I was quite good at logical and mathematical. But when I was at school, I was not Christ's, but a boarding school. I was taking prep because I was a prefect. And there was a boy who started using his pens to drum a rhythm, which is really annoying for everybody. And eventually I had a long talk with him. And he said he couldn't help it. These rhythms just came into his head and he just had to. And so I didn't actually punish him. But he was gangling. He wasn't good at sport. He wasn't very academic. And quite honestly, I thought he'd be a failure. And I gave him a long talk about how he needed to really concentrate and do things. His name was Michael Fleetwood. I think he's a damn sight more famous than I am. Fleetwood Mac, the drummer. And I would say that musical talent is a type of intelligence. He was kinetic as well, obviously, because he had to move and do things all the time. But that musical intelligence counts. Now, I couldn't drum a rhythm however hard I tried, not a new one, but it came to him all the time. Basically, what I'm saying is it's not everybody who follows the norm. It's the people who actually are different in some way. Now, quite a few of them possibly would be put down as autistic. Possibly some of them will have difficulty managing in society. Then you get the people who are the opposite. They've got very good emotional quotient. You've got to judge it in all ways. Okay. Then we move on to AI. And if you look at computing, I mean, I'm way out of date, but basically you've got rules of inference. You've got a big database, doesn't matter, data set database, and you've got a human computer interface. This means that the computer can ask questions. This means that it can refer back to a database. This means it's got an inference engine. But is that the same as actually thinking? And then we come to the consciousness that several people have alluded to. Is consciousness actually anything? Is it just steam that's given off by thinking? Is it the ghost in the machine that doesn't count? Or, in fact, is it something that's lacking in machines? And how much are those machines influenced by the fact that we've programmed them? How much has their, okay, maybe not the data set that they've taken from everything, although I suspect that will be pretty much Western, European thought processes. It's going to be influenced by what's put in. And I'm not sure. A friend of mine who's a well-known published poet and lectured at one of the English universities tried putting in and said, produce a poem by her own name. And then she published it. She put it out. And it was trite. It was cliche filled. It did have bits that were recognizably came from her writing, but it was not original writing of her style. And I think a lot of the people at the moment, and I'm not saying in the future, but at the moment who are worried by AI, and I have friends who are musicians and writers, are worried because they churn out stuff, because they put out stuff that sells but is not terribly original. I don't think at the moment that you're likely to get, say, really good modern jazz. I don't think you're going to likely to get a lyric and a tune that is totally original, that doesn't go back to anything. And of course, you could argue there is no such thing, that every tune can be related back to the connotations, the things that have the rhythms, the whole idea that is within the data set of music, within the data set of poetry. But from what I have seen, and I agree that I'm really out of date and I don't know, when I was last in this, you had two ways to approach it. One was trying to actually investigate and understand human intelligence and then recreate it. And the other one was trying to produce a program, an algorithm or set of algorithms that appeared to, say you follow a script and say that script appears to be the computer talking to you and coming out with sensible arguments, but it's all been put in as a script. Okay, Ron mentioned learning. I presume that the learning is still neural networks. Now, neural networks, they're probably much faster than when I last looked at it. I mean, when I retired, I said, I don't want to have anything to do with computing. I'm not going to read up the search. I'm going to write poetry and ignore what's happening in that world. But I haven't quite ignored it. But I know I'm not with it. But neural networks were quite slow. Neural networks, in my opinion, weren't really thinking, but they could learn. So is that by itself enough? And my own feeling, if I was young and able to research, I really would like to go into looking at, back 20 or 30 years ago, I think it was Berkeley, they were investigating biological computers. Now, I would like to investigate combining digital computers with biological computers, where you can get feelings, possibly emotions, reactions. You can put them together. Okay, there would be weaknesses, I agree. And I do feel, looking at my daughter and other young people, they are already merging into a sort of cyber thing. Young people are on their phone all the time. They don't actually need a memory. I mean, Ron, me, most of you probably learnt Shakespeare by heart, learnt poems by heart. Now they just want to look something up. They go on their phone and say, oh, so-and-so and so-and-so. And sometimes I'll find that if I'm in an argument, I was actually wrong or not totally correct. As it goes on, I think this will become a closer and closer relationship. We'll have chips in our heads, maybe. I know some people are scared about that. You'll be able to get messages, so you won't need to commit anything to memory. But it would be really interesting. But I think that is a curse in the East. May you live in interesting times. Okay, I finished.
Thank you very much. There's a hell of a lot going on, and it's amazing. I have long discussions with ChatGPT, incredibly long discussions, and they're always right, of course, but actually they're not. But that's another story. But it's amazing, amazing what's going on out there. Roland, do you mind if I, Kenneth? I think it's the first time you're here. Yes. Is it okay if I ask Kenneth? Roland, you're okay. Kenneth, welcome to us. It's your chair.
Well, thank you, Ron. I've heard so many wonderful things, and thank you for allowing me to speak some of the thoughts that I've been having that's resonating after listening to such great minds today. I don't even know where to start. There's so much But I think it's great to do what we're doing now and kind of like synchronizing the vocabulary and really operationalizing that variable of intelligence and artificial intelligence. And I think maybe it's my opinion, many others, that artificial intelligence always existed. The whole universe is intelligence in of its own, and it's consistently developing. Nature knows best. It is intelligent. It takes time. It's adjusting. And as far as artificial intelligence, as we know it now, might not necessarily be just artificial intelligence. What is it really? Possibly technological artificial intelligence, right? There was mechanical artificial intelligence. Just a time when somebody came up with the idea, they're a little bit exhausted by taking big stones and pushing it in front of your entrance to have a door or a barrier. And they invented the hinge, and they made a moving door. It was artificial. It was quite intelligent to come up with that step. Did it make major changes to society? Sure it did. And then it just goes on and on and on and developed from there. And where we are now with artificial intelligence or technological intelligence, where's it going? I think that there's absolutely no limit what's ahead of us. Don't forget, there's many philosophers in this room today, and we all quite understand Plato's analogy of the cave. And are we going to be hiding behind the shadows, or are we going to, have the courage to see what's going on at the end of that cave? And that's where it's going. It's still fundamental. I remember when they came up with the robotic vacuum that's picking things up in the home, and it's banging into walls and knows how to correct itself. It was very fundamental. It was intelligence. It was developing as it goes now. How do we keep a rein on it? I think that society of its own is going through what we would expect with any major adjustment. And what we see is change is often always resisted. And adjustments are difficult. Society itself often goes into social psychosis, and they rally together around one way of thinking, and then they chant and resist, or they go with it, and it just makes all these conflicts. But it will eventually subside, and things are going to drift forward. There's going to be a major impact societally, changes in the economies, changing in the workflow in the workplace, and all kinds of systems are going to change as they are. And I remember some gentlemen in this room saying some very accurate things. I think is the vulnerability of the AI being able to be corrupted. We are kind of comparing AI intelligence based on a comparison of human intelligence, because we're humans. We often do that. We all have some level of a centrism. We judge others based on what we know of ourselves as our beings. So to really understand human behavior, which is one of the most complicated things to put into a vocabulary, human emotion, human thought, think about levels of intelligence. Some seasoned psychologists will narrow it down to like 8 or 9 or 10 points of intelligence. But I personally believe that if we collectively thought about it now, we'd come up with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of varying degrees of intelligence. Like, emotional intelligence that we hear people talking about within the room, but it's so much deeper than that. There's things like humor intelligence, there's academic intelligence, there's also consequential intelligence. I know it as consequential thinking, consequential thought process. How about consequential instinct? And I don't think we're going to be seeing that traditionally in the way AI is right now, because we all know some people that make a mistake, even commit a crime, only to be punished for it and then go do it again and again and again. They don't even learn from their own mistakes. Others have to make a mistake and they learn from it. Like, oh, I made a mistake, I'm not going to do that again. Some of us don't have to go through all that. We'll learn from other people's mistakes. And that's key. That's a higher level of emotional instinct, emotional, or let's say consequential instinct, consequential intelligence. How do we prevent this from being corrupted by, which is the biggest threat, is human beings themselves? I think that it's probably what's going to happen is a branch off. There was a time of the development of all intelligence, like when we started turning beasts into burdens and turning like animals into useful creatures for us. Taking a wild horse and taming it, and then turning it into a farm animal. And then to the point where we don't need it anymore, intelligence is developed. We created automobiles. Now we have tractors doing all the work. And now how does it develop from there? There will be a time that this artificial intelligence we're looking at is not going to exist because we're going to find something even bigger and better. But how do we not let it get corrupted by the people themselves? And I think that it may actually swarm off as we try to retain it and use it for our own personal gain to improve our businesses, improve our lives, make things easier for ourselves. Can we lose control of it? Horses themselves only limit their level of intelligence. No matter what, we can tame them. They can dance around in a circus. They can plow a field or let us ride the back, but it's not going to go more than that. This machine that they're making will be able to learn and keep learning and learning and learning and learning. We may completely separate ourselves. There'll be humans, and then there'll be this intelligence system that's up, and it'll probably swarm off to create its own governmental entity. Is there going to be a artificial intelligence government with artificial intelligence law enforcement? Are machines going to be regulating its own behavior, just like the human beings have systems and governments that created these varying systems to control our behavior? Who's going to control that behavior? So we're going to have to use AI as a tool to rein in its own behavior. There's probably going to be systems like, I don't know, euthanasia or capital punishment. There's going to be ways that they're going to have to abort complete sections of AI if it's doing things that are erroneous and detrimental to mankind themselves. And how do we be able to do something like that?
Thank you very much, Kenneth. Thank you. Two small points. There is nothing beyond Plato's cave. Everybody thinks they're beyond Plato's cave because everybody's looking at everybody else in it. There's nothing beyond it because everybody thinks they're outside it, looking at everybody else. So that's that's first thing. The second thing, there cannot, in my opinion, there cannot be anything that is not human intelligence. Any intelligence has to be human because we wouldn't be able to understand or even know what something is, that it's intelligent, because all we've got is our intelligence. That's why I called it augmented intelligence, because it is human intelligence that's just whizzing ahead, but it'll always be human. Even if we don't like what we're doing, it's still human. We still don't like other people doing things, but it's still us who don't like them doing it. So I can't see how artificial intelligence will move away from human intelligence, apart from the way that I said it'll just go so fast. It'll still be human intelligence, but it won't be understandable. Anyway, that's my little point I wanted to make. But thank you very much, Kenneth. Very, very interesting. Thank you. Roland.
Hi. Wow. I've got this notebook here, and it's just every 5 minutes there's a new point. Well, not every 5 minutes, every minute. So I've got this sort of scroll all over it, which I've got no idea how to think about it now or talk about it. But I was quite amused, actually. One of the things Kenneth said, which was strangely relevant to me. I'm just starting a farm in Norway, and one of the things we'll be looking at is tractors. And in fact, we've decided against getting a tractor now, and instead we're going to get horses and start using those instead. So that was just weird, but anyway. Where do I want to start? I suppose I think I wanted to start with the idea of, and then come back to it. Who cares? Who cares what intelligence is? There's a lot of really passionate speaking in this meeting about intelligence, particularly about artificial intelligence and its potential threats. And one of the interesting things is, why? Why do we care? What is it that makes us worry about it? And I want to come back to that idea after having wallowed in my own sort of ideas about intelligence. I really like a lot of the things Michael said about intelligence. basically self-organization around a reference. He used the word values. I use the word reference, but essentially, I think intelligence is fundamentally about the ability of a system to reorganize itself around some kind of reference, and basically to integrate changing influences. So underneath intelligence, I think, is the idea of continuity, the idea of a system attempting to continue something. I'm not going to say that system wants to continue itself, because I don't think that's entirely correct. There are lots of examples of systems, whether human or other biological systems, that appear to sacrifice themselves for something else. And so I don't think it's about continuity like survival of that system. I think systems have a much wider concept of continuity, which may incorporate other systems into it. I think I've mentioned before in one of the previous discussions something like, the parent who runs out into the street after the kid who's run in front of a car and pushes the kid out of the way, knowing that they may well themselves be killed by the car. Why do they do that? Is it because they want to survive? No. There's something bigger going on there, which is about the continuity of something larger than that individual. But the reason I refer to continuity is that basically there must be some way in which a system can enable its continuity. And this, I think, is where intelligence comes in. And I don't think, from my point of view, I don't think intelligence can be limited in any way to any specific aspect of it. It's entirely contextual. And, if one has to look at a particular aspect of intelligence, you can. But I think the basic principle of intelligence is the ability to use feedback to change behavior so as to enable continuity. So you could say that intelligence and continuity are like completely linked together. So I'm going to, touching back on what I started with, was this idea of, well, supposing intelligence is all about continuity, then different systems are going to be wanting continuity. And maybe one system, its desire for continuity, and its actions arising from that are have a disintegrating effect on other systems. So there's basically a competition for continuity going on here. And I think this is where this concern around AI comes in, that we as humans may well feel threatened by systems that apparently could be more powerful than us. So on the question of AI itself, I think there needs to be a distinction here between a system that is self-organizing around a reference that acts as a tool, and a system that is self-organizing around a reference that has the ability to change its reference. I think that is a big distinction. We are familiar as human beings with tool making. I mean, it's one of the things that perhaps differentiates us from many other, perhaps all other creatures, is our incredible ability to create tools. But we don't normally think of tools as being that much of a threat unless we misuse them. So, it's a lot faster using a circular saw than it is using a handsaw. We talked about, people have talked about the speed of processing of AI. Well, a circular saw is much faster than a handsaw, but it's not really that threatening because it's a tool. I can decide what to do with it. And while it's a tool, I don't see that there's a problem with it. The difficulty is when it ceases to be a tool and starts to act according to references that we haven't given it. Now, is that possible with AI? I don't really see why not. I mean, when you consider, for example, the act of conception, where male and female join and create a new life form, do we know what the reference is for that new life form? I don't think so. I mean, that evolution is based upon this extraordinary ability of genetics to mutate, to change, to diversify. Is that feasible for an artificial intelligence to do something similar? Could it, for example, introduce a random reference if it knew that it had a reference? Maybe. So I don't really see, I think if you create a system that is actually capable of self-organizing around a reference and also has the ability to change that reference, I think you've possibly created life because that's what living systems do. So is that a good idea or not? Well, that's a matter for us each to decide, I guess, based upon what we consider our references happen to be. I don't think there can be any way of referring to this problem objectively. It's entirely subjective. I mean, there are people in the world, no doubt, that we can point to and say, gosh, they've created havoc. We don't like them or what they're doing or their approaches to things. But perhaps they're just not sufficiently influential to have this worry about. AI, I think, attracts this concern because of its exponentially phenomenal rate of learning and its apparent capabilities for speed, deep, you could say, thinking, and so forth. I guess from a point of view of a human threat, the problem is going to come when it's able to modify its own hardware. And maybe that's not far away. If it is able to modify its own hardware and it's able to change its own references, then I really don't think, I mean, basically we've created a new life form. And I can't really see why it should have any limits. It's going to just carry on with whatever it happens to do.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything else I was going to add there. I said there's a few things that there was a couple of other minor points I thought that were interesting. I think it was one of the speakers referred to awareness of body state. So, I was having this conversation the other day with my family about whether children can see themselves. It's quite an interesting question. This issue of, can you see yourself? Are you aware of yourself? Because if you are, it changes the way you think about things. And it changes them even more if you're aware of yourself as a projector of your own universe. That really changes the way you think about things and the things you do. So there could be aspects of self-realization, you could say, or self-modeling of an artificial intelligence that will then change its reference system as well. That seems to be pretty possible. So anyway, I think I'll stop there, and then probably from other things as well, but I'll come back later.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
That's interesting when you talked about creating life. I can't see why not. But then you're saying that intelligence has to be part of a life form, which is going a bit further. But I can't see any way out of what you just said. I think there is something in there. It just bothers me. Intelligence attached to non-life. But I suppose that's what AI is. But anyway, thank you very much. Very interesting. Lots to think about there. Thank you. Krishna, hi. Is this the first time? I don't remember. You've been here before, I think, right?
Thank you. This is my second meeting. So
that's it. I thought I remembered you. Yeah. Welcome back.
Yes. Thank you very much. There's a lot of information shared. So just to start with, since it seems to be an AI-centric meeting, it's ironic to know that even in workplaces nowadays we are encouraged to, or sometimes required to, use AI to prove our intelligence. It's kind of important to realize the significance of AI that way. But I want to move away from that a little bit and just to say, share some of my observations about human intelligence per se. Just few centuries ago, I would say that human intelligence has evolved. And a few centuries ago, I would give you a rudimentary examples, if I will. The subjective reality we all shared was that, the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. And as we see it, and then our intelligence evolved, and then we saw that to be an objective reality, that it's not the case. Although we see directly with our eyes that it's what we see, perceive as different than what it is actually. We know that sun is not moving around the earth, it's the other way around. So the human intelligence has evolved. And also, I'm trying to share that the human intelligence is also, there's a constraint. It's constrained by the body, mind, and intellect, right? There's body and mind. If I'm asleep, is the human intelligent? Am I intelligent when I'm asleep? And then also when my mind is distressed, I don't have the same grade of intelligence that I have when my mind is alert. So there is a tight connection between body and mind. And of course, and as humans have a day of birth and a day of death, our intelligence is certainly constrained within that time. After our life, our intelligence is gone. So from that perspective, there is a human intelligence. And also, I would say, I think many speakers shared that there is a cosmic intelligence. With our human intelligence, we are able to perceive the cosmic, what is there in the cosmos. As we all know, even if you go within ourselves, there are trillion cells and DNAs and genes and all that. And outside of us, there are trillion galaxies and beyond. We are able to understand that, but we are in no way with our entire human intelligence, we can create that. So I do believe that there is a cosmic intelligence that creates all these. So we are certainly positioned within the cosmos. So that's just wanted to share that what I thought. And as far as AI is concerned, AI did not exist before human intelligence. So human intelligence created AI, but our dependence on AI, we have evolved so much. We used intuition a lot. I don't think AI can create become another Einstein or Newton or Schrodinger and create paradigm shift, because they use intuition to understand some of the abstract unknowns, right? If there is an unknowns, I don't think AI can manage to discover. So that's my impression. But I do share the danger that we have been evolving so much, so long. AI probably is creating a shift that from an evolution to a devolution. We are probably devolving with more dependence on AI. So these are some of the few things that I just wanted to share and see, what y'all think. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Krishna. Thank you. James, you've been very patient.
Sorry. Yeah, you always say that.
But it's always true. You're a very patient person.
Well, I wanted to wait today because I certainly am not an expert in AI, although I've touched it. I was involved in an AI project many years ago. It actually was neural network. Yeah, then yeah. So, but this is kind of so it is something I find very attractive, and I'm interested in the idea of subjective models, the idea that we can just take an AI, particular AI, and I want to do some tests on this, like Copilot or Gemini, and see the ones that are actually specialized in doing subjective communications, see how far they go, see, because and that's counter to kind of the current mania against data sharing. The idea is that we share our data, and as soon as we share our data, it's like giving people your social security number so they can scam you and steal your identity and stuff like that. Yeah, it's a little bit like that, but on the other hand, and it's also alarming, sometimes, especially on the iPhone, I found it's alarming when you make a phone call, you talk about something with someone, and you find it hitting your YouTube feed or something like that. It's like it's a little bit shocking, the capabilities they actually have of gleaning data from your personal communications. But the as far as the yes, but as far as I just wanted to comment, I guess, on that, that I'd be very interested in finding out some of the subjectivity. I'm not too. I've always been kind of against doomsaying in AI, because AI is always just the product of someone. So as long as you know who is making the AI, you can determine whether it's possibly good or bad, and you can make judgments about it, and you can try to make ethical judgments about AI, and you can decide, whether it's doing a good job or a bad job. And the variety allows us to participate in the AIs that we consider safe and the ones that we consider to be useful to us. And I think what would be a big mistake is that if we only had national AIs, in other words, if we made Chinese AI illegal in every respect, sort of like TikTok might go in that direction, or if we or vice versa, if China were to completely make American AIs illegal, or Russia or anything like that. So we have to have like this ability to be able to we have to maintain our our freedom, not only in our personal actions and our actions on the internet, but that includes artificial intelligence. I think we have to stay open to the fact that Chinese intelligence could offer us more opportunities above and beyond what we accomplish in American intelligence. And so I'm not a nationalist in that aspect. I think that has to be kept open, and we have to go. And part of the reason that I think this is so important is because propaganda exists. We have an envelope of propaganda that we live in through media, and we need to maintain our own sanity outside the propaganda stream that we consume, or the propaganda streams that we consume. Yeah, multiple. So and the people like Harari, that try to make determinations of what I is and what it is and so forth. That's very interesting. Personally, I love the movie by Steven Spielberg, AI. It was very unpopular because people misinterpreted the robots at the end of the movie. He depicted a robotic civilization that was going to replace the human civilization, which had self-extincted itself. And the viewers of the movie very widely misconceived the picture on the screen as an alien civilization, very much like the quote you gave from Harari. And I think just as much as we can, they thought that the replacement civilization for human civilization would be a alien civilization, much like you said, Harari said that artificial intelligence was alien intelligence. I think it could be just as much called totalistic intelligence, or and you mentioned plagiarized intelligence. Yes, but that's on at a very superficial level. the idea that if we have all that information available to us, what are we going to do? We're going to learn and report everything that we hear, just like we do now. And then if we actually write documents and we explain things to people from the standpoint of totalistic intelligence, which maybe artificial intelligence in some respect, is, then people will say, we're plagiarizing everything we say. We're plagiarizing everything we write. In other words, all those academic rules, that you have to have a footnote and all and so forth, which sort of become less cogent. So, and I think all of these comments on continuity from Roland, I don't know if I fully appreciate that, because I see continuity as a constant in physics. In other words, continuity just exists throughout the physical world, and it doesn't even apply. I don't see how it applies in any special way to intelligence or to psychology or anything like that. It's everything. Everything is continuous. So I don't quite get that direction out, that point. But yeah, that's all. I just I think it's a great platform. In the future, there's going to be new aspects of AI, such as the subjective aspect. In other words, we'll be able to converse directly and get direct feedback on some of our deepest thoughts and philosophical information and things like that. And I think that'll be very, very practical and useful. The only problem with the existing AI is that some of the existing AIs will take majority opinions and try to enshrine them in their answers. And I find sometimes you have to be extremely combative to get the AI off of a majority opinion and get it to recognize that you have a different opinion and that there might be some logic in a minority opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, James. There are lots of comments being typed out. Some of them are very good, and we're missing them all. And Christina made a very funny comment, which I'm not going to repeat, but I wish she would. A little joke, which I found by chance. I saw it because it was short. I can't see what's going on there till afterwards. But anyway, anybody who wants to share them, there's some very, very good stuff down there. Anyway, thank you, James. William.
Thank you. Ron, I opened the invitation and learned that you have a distinction in mind in this discussion between intelligence as a reference that is a thing and intelligence which is a quality of behavior. Do I understand that right?
Yes, I think so, yes.
So where I go with this conversation is we're taking that issue of qualitative character and impersonating it now in an evolution of AI and intelligence. So we're saying, look, intelligence is a quality of behavior, and we see that in AI, we see that in decisions that people make, we see that in what lawyers do, we see that in what judges do, we see that in all kinds of in circumstances. But it's a quality. It's not a thing. It's not something that we are able to point to and say, that's it. It can be cut in half. It can be used. What I'm saying to you now is that is this issue of what is the nature of intelligence as a tool, as a description of behavior that's effective in the world, rightfully going to be something that's an impersonation of humanity, human action? In other words, are we impersonating and making the same reification mistake we made when we said it's a thing, to talk about a AI and intelligence as a thing that is an impersonating thing that behaves and is going to create meta impersonations in the future? I don't know if I get that. I don't know if I understand that. Why is a tool becoming a person? That's my problem with this account.
It's a very interesting point.
Because a tool is not a person. A tool is something that we use. And the Humans can make systems. Humans can do everything that you're trying to impute to AI and to systems that are are human. And so I'm just saying to you, do I have it wrong? Do I not see it right?
I think that as soon as you try and do an IQ test, you are looking at a thing. You're testing a thing.
Yeah.
That would be the part of the ontology that I mentioned. That is intelligence as something that exists only when you use intelligence to make something exist. Like you know that things don't exist until you know about them. That's the epistemological. That's what I meant. And I think as soon as you start testing it, you're testing an it. And the it is something you have to test an it. You can't test anything else, right? Am I
right?
So that was the point I was making. It's quite a thing with me. The epistemology side of things against the ontological side, and I'm for the former, basically. That's
Am I wrong in saying we made a transition from a tool to an impersonation? Am I wrong there?
I don't know what right and wrong is. I have to tell you, I'm not sure why you would be wrong or why you'd be right. It's another way of looking at it. But I said it. As soon as I say it, I've gone to the tool. The it is a very dodgy word.
Yes.
Because
it wouldn't be a fair thing to say you're talking about an impersonation of an intelligence as a evolutionary development that's going to carry us to meta intelligence in a different system world where AI machines talk to each other, create new systems, and do things like that. Is that the lesson we're having today?
I'm not sure. You're making some very good points there. I think that when AI develops, and my big point today was, whether I'm right or wrong, I don't know, that it's not artificial. It can't be artificial. If it's artificial, we wouldn't understand it. I think it's that's why I called it augmented. It is human intelligence just getting way ahead, and so fast that we won't even recognize it. We can't,
right?
Because things that will be invented in 100 years' time, we have no idea what that could possibly mean. If we saw it today, we wouldn't. Right. That was my point. That's the worrying part. At the point where AI or intelligence gets ahead of us because we can't understand it yet, I think that's the dangerous point.
Is that a point when it becomes a person?
When it becomes
humans, that it has to be regarded as a citizen of the world?
We wouldn't understand it. It's just too advanced. It's gone 100 years in say a year. We won't understand what they're talking about. That's my worry.
I see. Okay, thank you.
But that's just me. Thank you very much. Very good points. Thank you. Maurice, another patient person.
I've actually been sitting here enjoying all that I have heard. I attend your monthly meetings. I have done for the last 5 years in order to learn something about the world and about things that otherwise I'd have no idea about. But I was sitting here saying to myself, what on earth can I possibly say that would sound intelligent? And I really had a big problem. It's all been said. And I really don't have anything to add, so I'm going to be very, very brief. Richard mentioned the 11 plus. That was the intelligence test that he and I sat at the age of 11. And I was very fortunate that my mother realized before the test that I was going to fail very badly and end up by having to go to a lower level secondary school, and probably finish my life being very rich and successful at something or other, but not what it was that she wanted me to be. So she got a tutor to come and teach me every week for a few months before the intelligence test, and he taught me how to pass the intelligence test. And he taught me how to answer the intelligence questions correctly, and I must have done it quite well because I got into a good school, they said. And I asked myself, maybe somebody else can answer this. I've spent a lot of my life trying to improve my emotional intelligence. This time because my wife demanded it. And I spent a lot of money, a lot of time in getting people to try and teach me to be emotionally intelligent, sort of be more, develop the female side of me. Successful or not, I really don't know. So in terms of human beings, can we really alter our intelligence? Or is it just a question of uncovering what was there in the first place? But, you know, I was laboring under a complete misapprehension. I'm sorry. When I read your, Ron, I read your email and it was about intelligence, I immediately, obviously assumed you were going to talk about the CIA or military intelligence and human tell and all that stuff. And you have mentioned it. Well, I'm really quite disappointed. But when I heard the talk about AI, the thought came to me that we could be already perhaps at this moment in a situation where the AI machines of, let's say, Russia are already at this moment penetrating the AI machines of America, and or vice versa, or any direction you like, and the whole thing may turn into an enormous world war between AI machines and maybe not even involve us. This could be a good thing. You know, if they can fight it out between them, maybe it's better for all of us. The only other thing I wanted to mention, just briefly, was I try at every meeting to say the word death. I think it's important that at every meeting somebody should use the word death. So I will now and just say that whatever intelligence any of us have, or think we have, when we die, it will end. It won't be there anymore. But if the AI machine is able to, I don't know, pass on to the next model AI machine what it has learned, then that is intelligence which will never die.
Yeah. I'll do it now.
I don't know if that's a good thing or not, but I think I'll leave it at this point and just say that I've tried very hard not to seem like a member of the intelligentsia.
Thank you very much, Maurice. I can't make any comment, but I will have to talk about that other intelligence another time. But very, very quietly. And by the way, this whole discussion is actually on AI. It's on at the moment, and it summarizes the whole thing. If anybody wants it, I can send it afterwards. A file comes out with a complete AI has done the whole thing. What people have said, etc. Actually, not that bad. It's not brilliant, but it's quite amazing. Anybody wants it, please contact me. Tony, are you back again, or you didn't? Yeah. Could I put Catherine in because she hasn't spoken yet?
Sure, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Off you go. I don't think we can hear you.
How's that?
That's good.
Okay. Ron, I love your definition of augmented intelligence. I think that's a great definition. Okay, so what I wanted to talk about is emotional intelligence, not the other types of intelligence that we've been speaking of, because I'm not a physicist or scientist or an academic. I'm a psychotherapist. So when you talk about different kinds of intelligence, one of the kinds that is continually part of my work and my understanding is emotional intelligence. And a person can be very brilliant and accomplished in the world. They can have great intellectual skills and they can have high levels of achievement, but they don't necessarily have high levels of emotional intelligence. And from my point of view, humans don't necessarily learn from their patterns, from their past experiences, or from their mistakes. We often tend to repeat the same behaviors in our relationships in life, even if we have, quote, understood them on an intellectual level, it may or may not impact a change of behavior. And in order to be emotionally intelligent, you have to be not only self-aware, but you have to be very resilient and flexible, because change is very difficult for human beings. And Josh said something about how AI will still evolve its own programming through its past preconceptions, and humans also repeat their own programming. Will AI replace psychotherapists? Will AI replace me? It's quite possible, because computers are now capable of reading tone of voice and facial expression. But can AI replace 50 years of experience or years of training, and in the practice of psychotherapy, it's important that you have intuition, insight, empathy, as well as professional training. But it's my experience that many human beings, in terms of their thoughts, actions, and behavior, this revolves around preconceived concepts. And there's a musician named John Cage, who some of you may have heard of, and he has a great quote, I think. And again, this is talking about behavior, not other things. He says, "We learn nothing from the things we know." And I think that's a great quote, because it's very hard to see one's own behavior, because we are inherently self-referential. Let's see, what were my other points here? Carrie talked about negative entropy and what it means to be human. Of course, this is the very question of emotional intelligence. And part of being human means to understand others' perceptions. And this is kind of difficult to do if we're constantly projecting our own onto the environment and onto other people. So, for example, Maurice said he spent a lot of time and money trying to learn emotional intelligence and how to, quote, access and incorporate your feminine side. Well, one of the first ways that people, not necessarily first, but ongoing, you need to learn to pay attention to your body sensations, which often we don't, because we're very head oriented, and develop good listening skills, which often we don't, because when others are talking, we think we know what they're going to say, and we consider our own ideas. So this kind of openness, it can be accomplished. It takes some time. And it's one of the things that I deal with all the time in my work, where I have very accomplished people who are completely out of touch, or would, they don't exhibit the same kind of emotional intelligence that they do intelligence in the world. That is my comment.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thank you. Very interesting. There's another perspective. Very nice. Thank you. Tone.
One of the things I was going to say, I hope this isn't too in the weeds, but it's that when we were talking about the idea of intelligence, the idea of whether there's any consciousness involved, the idea of the difference between artificial and biological. If you notice in sort of my first comment, I mentioned energy, I mentioned metabolism. If you're all familiar with Terence Deacon and his book Incomplete Nature, he does a wonderful job of arguing that like sort of we got focused on information processing in the machinery of DNA and we forgot about the energetic story, because inherently to be biological is to be energetically situated. We're energetically coupled in the environment because we constantly have to resist entropy. Now, something to consider is if you look at when humans have the most calorie burn, the most energy that's burned for our cognition, it's for conscious attention when novel situations have to be addressed. And a fascinating thing is if you look at the training of language models, that is actually where the similar parallel seems to be. So it's not when we interact with them, it's actually in the training. Like look at the orders of magnitude. It costs millions, billions, eventually trillions to train these networks to have the intelligence. Even the most expensive models, O1 Pro, the unreleased O3 high compute that ranked so highly on ARC AGI prize, fractions of cost relative to how much it costs to train them. And so I have a hunch that it doesn't mean it's right, but I have a hunch that the actual intelligence is sort of crystallized in the training process. And when we interact with it, it's not really the intelligence, it's really just some sort of echo, or it's like a tape playback almost. And so that's fascinating because if we try to think about things about what matters, could there be agency? Could there be awareness? How do we control these things? It strikes me that the place we need to look is very inaccessible, which is in the reduction of the token space to the latent space. That's where you see a very high dimensional discrete space of tokens that has to then get compressed into a continuous latent space. That's where the meaning, in some sense, that's where the quote unquote intelligence, in some sense, seems to be.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Tone. Interesting. Thank you. Michael.
Is not James before me? I saw his hand for some time.
Pardon?
I think James is before me. No?
Not according to my...
Oh, okay. All right.
James, okay, I've got Michael, Josh, and you.
Mike, Ron doesn't make mistakes, Michael.
Yes, I
Please.
do. Oh, yes, I do. Oh,
okay,
God,
good to know.
Oh.
All right.
Thank you, James.
So a few comments. First, I appreciate what Catherine and Maurice said about emotional intelligence. I'm still learning it and still probably have a long way to go. It's not an easy thing, but it's important. Then about the difference between tools and persons, I have to know that some people are using other people as tools. We know this, and we know the examples. And also there are other distinctions between a tool and a person. What is your connection to your pet, for instance? Well, it's probably not a tool, maybe not necessarily a person. But what if your pet somehow evolves and becomes smarter than you? How would you characterize this? I don't know. Now, I am intrigued by Roland's comment about continuity as a driving force of this emergent behavior, including intelligence. Although I'd wish to find maybe a more general term for this. So this is what is called in philosophy existence, in physics stability or conservation, in biology it's survival, but it's always something that a system is kind of trying to do, although I would not call it necessarily a teleological behavior, but it looks like teleological, because if a system does not pursue this goal of not necessarily individual survival, but maybe survival of a larger system of which this system is an element, then it would not exist. And so this is essentially the idea behind the theory of evolution, that any system has to do something in order to survive, or to help a larger system to survive. And this is important because when we are talking about, say, artificial intelligence as opposite to natural intelligence, I have to point out that our natural intelligences, all our intelligences are artificial, because we were not born intelligent. We got them from other people, mostly from our parents and others, and from information provided by other people. And we know that human children, if they're deprived of this interaction with other humans, they cannot develop at least human level intelligence. So artificial intelligence in this sense is not that different. And also this idea that we can somehow shut down AI if it misbehaves or disengage with it, I don't think this is practical, because we already depend so much on the internet, which to large degree is driven by not necessarily LLM-based models, but algorithms, self-learning algorithms, and we cannot function without this. So the best that we can hope for is that, like when the Dutch was invaded by the English, and they were losing the war, and they destroyed their dikes and flooded intentionally most of the country to stop this invasion. And they succeeded, but at a terrible cost. So they practically devastated all the agriculture and everything. So maybe something like this we still could be able to do. I doubt it. But then Maris raised a very important question about death and about how we feel about this. So in my opinion, there is no doubt that humanity cannot survive for too long alongside with superhuman level intelligence or this super intelligence. Either it will gradually disappear or it will be maybe eliminated by the super intelligence, but it has no future. But could we consider the super intelligence as our future? And how would we feel about this? So I know that I don't have a future as an individual, so I will not live for too long. But I know that I have children and now grandchildren, so they will live. And so I feel not too bad about this. But can we feel the same way about the super intelligence that we are just creating? That and someone already mentioned this, that maybe this is our future. Maybe this is the way for us to make intelligence immortal. And I am not sure how I feel about this. But I rather I'm afraid of this. But this is just my personal attitude, and maybe I could be wrong. And lastly, about what Jeroen suggested, to call it augmented intelligence rather than alien intelligence, I think it's both. It's augmented in the sense that right now it's very much depends on human efforts to develop and improve it. But it's already alien because these AI researchers, they admit that they don't fully understand what is going on inside this LLM-based systems, which are still very primitive. They are very far from like the real intelligence. But it's already difficult to understand what they are doing internally, and there is the whole area of research of interpreting these systems. But my hunch is that by the time when we agree on terminology about how to call this super intelligence, it will not matter, because it will be up to it or whatever it is. So this discussion, whole discussion will be pointless. Thank you. Let me stop.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael. Very interesting. Josh.
Yeah, so far, most of the contributions to the discussion, as I hear them, are there's certain implicit assumptions that are undergirding their notions of what AI is, what intelligence is, and the distinction between human and machine intelligence. But those presuppositions don't seem to be touched on at all. So let me suggest a way of looking at human intelligence that Subal posits this, that if you look at, if you ask the question, which is important in terms of significance, in terms of the import of what one might call intelligence, and compare an individual's intelligence measured however you want, let's say in terms of IQ within a particular culture and an era, versus the differences between eras. So I'm talking about thinking about historical development of culture as a whole that we all of us participated, belong to. I would argue that the differences between people within any given culture are dwarfed by the significance of the changes in terms of how we understand the world if you take a broader historical view over the course of centuries. And I want to then make another point, and that is that the nature of this, if you want to call it intelligence, is a social intelligence. That is to say, well, that's why one can characterize entire societies or movements, Romantic era, Enlightenment, the Renaissance, in terms of kind of innovations and discoveries and changes in whole hog changes in looking at the world that affect every aspect of culture. As to say, one can talk about Renaissance science and Renaissance poetry and Renaissance philosophy and Renaissance painting and Renaissance music, and not just mean that all those different forms happen to emerge within the same time span, but rather that there's a set of ideas that are held in common to some extent among all those different forms. And the implication there is that you cannot look at science or technology on its own in isolation, as if, bright people could just happen to come up with a certain set of ideas and whatever's going around in the culture around them is somewhat peripheral to it. The very understanding of the nature of the ideas within technology have to be understood in terms of how they're absolutely inextricably interconnected with every other domain of culture, including philosophy. So right now, I'm talking to you on my iPhone. A lot of you may be on phones, you're on computers. If you look at these devices, these physical devices are material instantiations of ideas that are basically, they go back 200 years. You go to Leibniz and Frege, and a lot of the basis for the understanding that goes into them is quite old. So by the time technology gets its hands on these ideas, they're already moldy ideas as far as philosophy is concerned, and even other domains of culture. So the idea here that people are throwing out of, that the technologies will surpass us and they'll have wars with each other and we'll be left in the wayside. Understand what you're suggesting here. For example, when Roland talked about, a referent, the idea of an AI being able to define its own new referent point, and therefore it would then take a leap beyond us and it would become like living things do, where they then recreate their own, basis. So part of the implication of what I'm stating about how any particular understanding of technology is inextricably embedded with so many other presupposition means this. It means that 100 years from now, so many different aspects of the assumptions which undergird the building of machines right now will have changed, including, I suggest, even, to give an example, Michael talks about the distinction between, on the one hand, the values of living things and how they're motivated on the basis of, say, survival value or such, some such, and what human intelligence has in common with AI. What does human intelligence have in common with AI? Symbolic, representational logic and rationality. That's a presupposition, and that's a presupposition which has been heavily challenged in recent years within many quarters in biology and in embodied Fourier cognitive science and activism. So he's using a presupposition and extrapolating on the basis of a presupposition without recognizing it as a presupposition. He's assuming it's a factual, the factual ground of the way things are. But if in 100 years, and already it's the case, there are already factions that are moving beyond this notion of understanding, living things or AI or human intelligence on the basis of abstract representational, symbolic functioning, and recognizing that those are derivatives, that those are just, that they are not the fundamental basis of how we think. They're ways of carving up our understanding ourselves that emerged a couple hundred years ago. They're really irrelevant from, the associationistic era and Enlightenment thinking. So the idea that if in 100 years from now, so many of basic presuppositions which people don't even realize they're carrying around with them when they define intelligence are going to be different. The notion that so to say then that the reference point for an AI can change. It can change it within itself and become something different. What you're then saying is essentially that it will change its culture, because right when we change, if you look at the historical perspective, as science changes along with all their cultural domains in tandem from one era to the next, those are cultural changes which produce the shifts in the way, not just new technologies, but the way we understand the very nature of what technology is. So what you're saying then is you're saying that's what the machines will do. They will undergo a cultural shift on their own, independent of us. And the problem there is that they are, in order to undergo that kind of an independent cultural shift, a change in its reference point, independent of us, it would also have to reinvent all the other aspects, all the other assumptions, the embedded cultural assumptions that went into that era of AI, out of which we build the machines. And that's what's being forgotten here. There isn't this independence. There can't be this independence of this machine from us, because there's not even this independence of the individual from the culture in terms of what it means, of what culture, of what intelligence means. It's through the continuous sort of interwoven ways in which we affect each other that we create, our meaningful understandings, and that's how the peculiar thing we call technology emerges and changes its sense. I mean, if you look at techne among the Greeks, I mean, it was a vastly different notion of what the technological meant for them, than it is for us. And some would say, "Whoa, that's just progress." We've linearly, gotten closer and closer to the truth through our technologies. But again, that's a presupposition that's based in a certain era that thinks about the progress of science in a particular way, which has already been put into question for quite a while now among many quarters. But I don't hear much of that way of thinking in this group.
Thank you very much, Josh. Disappeared. Thank you. James.
Yeah, thanks. Josh, I appreciated a lot of what you said. I think you're kind of on the right track with that's a lot of stream of consciousness, but I think a lot of the things you said are tracking some of the truth about artificial intelligence and its relationship to human intelligence. And I think there's also this aspect of universal human intelligence, right, that we're trying to achieve with artificial intelligence. And I think that's closer to the truth. It used to be talked about, artificial intelligence used to be talked about in terms of general intelligence, like, will we develop a model that's generally intelligence that can just answer any question put to it, just the way a human would, so you can't tell it apart from a human. That was the original dream in the for the progress of computers, that they would sort of become one with us in a way. But what's been achieved is this idea of universal intelligence, which I think is really a great achievement, and but it will continue to evolve, right? And I think one of the elephant in the room when we talk about artificial intelligence for a long time will continue to be human intelligence. In other words, we'll be talking about artificial intelligence, we'll be talking about training and retraining, and that's a big subject in artificial intelligence. It takes a long time and a lot of electricity and so forth to train an artificial intelligence. And the problem of keeping it current and retraining is just basically being coped with right now. They have, like, you can push a button on some of the engines, like GPT and so forth, and you can push a button and ask it to do an internet search before it answers, so that you get the most current information incorporated into your answer, because it's not actually trained on current information. That training takes a long time, and retraining is still kind of like an extant problem that's going to probably handled gracefully, but it's going to require some thinking and programming, and maybe the plans are already in operation for that. but right now it's basically that we have coping models and artificial intelligence to try to make it to make the answers more relevant to current events, and like the search button. So yeah, I'm kind of so that's all. I just wanted to mention that human intelligence and the way it occurs on this kind of dynamic, energetic. People have talked about it in these ways: energetic, dynamic, kind of like reinventing the is going to be a big contribution to the future of artificial intelligence. The idea of like making it more match the range of human intelligences. I've sort of seen like some people here like have different ideas of what intelligence is. Some of them have the idea that intelligence is creative. Other ones see it as being right, or what we call the ego. In other words, if I agree with it, it's right, and anybody that disagrees with me is somebody that has to come into question. So and it's really a question of sorting between, and we have this with artificial intelligence too. We want to sort between these artificial intelligence engines. Maybe we like Gemini and we're not going to trust Copilot or something like that. So we have to, we all have this kind of experiential journey that we undertake when we learn, when we choose books to read and so forth. And the same thing is going to happen with the competition between artificial intelligence engines. Some will be more useful for one thing than another. So, and just as we, have our own attitudes towards intelligence, some of us think it's creativity, others think it's being right, whatever. So thank you everyone for your contributions today. I thought it was a great discussion. And
thank you very much.
Especially Tone and Josh and Mike, everyone. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you. Mike.
You're muted, Mike.
Can't hear you.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks. I wanted to return to emotional intelligence, which Catherine spoke so helpfully about, and which I think is really very important in our daily lives. So when I think about emotional intelligence, I think about understanding our own emotions and also understanding the emotions of others accurately, right? Sometimes understanding the emotions of others is called mentalizing, or sometimes even perspective taking. When we think about ourselves and understanding our own emotions, especially when they seem kind of inexplicable to us, we can look at our past, and a therapist can certainly help with that, because our past, our childhood, may be affecting our own emotions. But mostly I'm thinking in terms of other people's emotions, right? This mentalizing idea. And the thing I think is interesting was I'm reading a book right now by Lisa Barrett. Who's a researcher, and it's widely cited. It's called it's called How Emotions Are Made. But one thing she does, which I think is kind of interesting, it's kind of in service to her arguments, about how emotions are constructed. But she has a lot of lab work showing that looking at facial expressions is not a very accurate way to tell somebody's emotional state. So apparently it's a little more complicated than obviously a lot more complicated than looking at somebody's facial expressions or even their so-called body language. But another thing I think of when I think of emotional intelligence is the idea of what I'm going to call, because we have a lot of technical people here, emotional granularity. So the notion would be, instead of putting emotions into broad buckets like sad or mad or fearful, we have these other rather more nuanced emotions, which are combinations, kind of like the color wheel. The color wheel is a combination of the three basic colors to make all these other hues. But we combine different emotions to create emotions like wistful or rueful or things like that. So you kind of develop a language of emotional granularity. Not that it has to involve words per se, but I think it's really helpful for children to get an emotional vocabulary so that when they're mad, you can help them understand, well, it sounds like you're mad. It looks like you're mad because you're frustrated. Or it looks like you're mad because, you're defending yourself from being attacked, or kind of give them the language so that they are less mysteries to themselves, right? And adults can work on that too, on emotional granularity and trying to describe emotional states in ways that are not broad, all-encompassing buckets, but kind of fine-grained. I was just going to say a few more things. Actually, just one more. It's just kind of a practical thing. When we're trying to determine what emotion somebody else is feeling, sometimes people, they kind of think that you should just know how they're feeling, sort of magically. And one thing I've often said is, you got to say how you're feeling. So that's on the sending side, right? But if someone's not going to tell you how they feel, then you can say something like, this is pretty well known as an idea, the notion of reflective listening. You basically say something like, it sounds to me like you're feeling this way and because of this or that. So you talk about how you think they're feeling. And if you're wrong, they'll tell you, right? And then you keep working on it until you get it right. And so now you do know, and they agree that you got it right. So now they agree that you know how they're feeling. And then, when you finally do get it right, you kind of think, okay, well, how can I better recognize this emotion later? How does this person who I'm, maybe a partner with express that emotion? So you can kind of build more knowledge about that. But the key is to, and like I always say, I think in relationships, say what you think and say what you mean and mean what you say. So, game playing is not useful, and speculating and saying things like, that's what you say, but I know how you really feel is not helpful. It might even be true, but the idea is to, say how you feel and what you mean and mean what you say. So just a couple of thoughts about emotions. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike. Thank you. Roland.
Oh, yeah. A few points. First of all, about this idea of self-organization around a reference and the idea of a references. I think the way I look at it, this is that a system will only be able to self-organize around a reference if it knows whether it's organized or not. So one aspect of this is how does the system know that? How do we know that? We are living life, we're living forms. We survive from day to day. How do we know that our organizational state is integrated or not? I think that any system that is capable of acting intelligently has to be able to tell whether or not it's integrated in relation to some influence that's experiencing. So I think that this quality in human beings is what emotion is about. Emotion appears in relation to different qualities and states of integration. And emotion is, the reason why emotion, I think, is so useful in, for example, psychotherapeutic approaches or counseling or talking to children or whatever it may be, is because it enables one to reintegrate one's own approach rather than acting on conflict. And it is this integration approach. If I think from my experience in counseling work and so forth with clients is of seeing the person I'm dealing with as part of my system. So the integration that's involved includes both people. It's not just me or them. There is a unification of that. So in that process, emotion is a key. It's not really a key element. I think it's actually the only. It is the principal element in that process. In a sense, I can see what I would describe as a digital versus analog way of looking at this. I think the mind and its pattern recognition capabilities acts in what I call a digital kind of way. It simplifies, it extracts patterns out of complexity and eliminates detail, and so it has a superficiality to it. Emotion is much more analog. It contains vastly more information, and in that sense has vastly more use. So that's, I think, some stuff about integration and the reference thing. I really can't see why an artificial intelligence could not change its reference. And in this sense, I really depart from what Josh says. I think an artificial intelligence that really wanted to change its reference, for example, could simply do so by aligning itself with something which is quasi-random or indeed organic. Because we already have that. I mean, organic structures already have that system. When you have fusion of a male and female component in reproduction, you end up with something which is unpredictable. That's how evolution works. Why AI should somehow be exempt from the forces of evolution, I don't really understand that. That seems to me to be a big assumption, which I don't really see why that would be the case. Tone mentioned something interesting about energy, which I felt was resonant with what I was referring to around integration. I think if you act on an integrated, if a system is in a state of integration, in other words, it has a sense of wholeness, then it's going to use comparatively less energy. If a system is in a state of conflict, which it might well be if it's encountering a new type of influence that it doesn't know what to do with, then it's going to be using a lot more energy because it is in a state of conflict. And its process of resolving that conflict and turning it into a skillful behavior, well, is likely to involve a considerable amount of energy compared with acting on that skill. You can see the same thing for example, in learning an instrument. It takes a lot of time and practice to learn an instrument, but once you've learned it, then performing on it is much less effort and indeed much more integrating. The last thing I wanted to say was I think Josh mentioned something about in 100 years' time, we'll look at things differently and so forth. I may have misunderstood this, but so what is what I would say to that. Surely, as intelligent people, we are questioning what we do now, not what people might do in 100 years' time, or how things might be different later. We are questioning in our actions, what is it that we want to do now in order to get the things that we want to do to happen? So it is our current understanding of things that really matters. And sure, we may well revise our understanding of things from moment to moment. Things do move in paradigm shifts. and people over the years develop ideas that were unthought of many years before. But right now, what are we going to do? How do we act? Surely on the basis of what we are right now, not what we might be in 100 years' time. So that's, yeah, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Roland. Thank you. Tone, you're a glutton for punishment.
Yeah, so actually, following off from what Roland said, because he commented on something I said, which is to say that the energetics are so important, and I want to be super clear because sometimes people think that that inherently means eating physical things. I want to be clear making that distinction, right? What I think the more abstract sense is when Roland talks about references and when Josh was talking about them not being able to change their references. Again, I would direct you guys to consider the work of Terence Deacon with his book, Incomplete Nature. He actually says a lot of things that speak to this, but it's basically the idea that essentially what gives you references of value, right, or references of valence to go towards this or away from this. In our case, biologically, it comes from energy gradients. In our case, it comes from the fact that if we do not reduce internal entropy, we will be dissipated into the environment. And by the way, this is very similar to what Carl Friston talks about when he talks about his Markov blanket, right? That's another way of thinking about intelligence, is that in some sense, in the Friston case, that is a little bit more abstract, but it's the case of what does an entity have to do to maintain their blanket against all these processes that would disrupt its coherence. And so to go to the point that Roland was making about reference, and I kind of put this in the comments, but it's basically my thought that in artificial system, because they didn't come about through a process of evolution, we almost like sort of God created them and gave them the seed. They never evolved to be this way. And so I think it's hard for them to have a change of reference now. But if you would allow them, and this is, again, something I said earlier, that one of the creators of the ARC AGI Prize, Francois Chalet, has said that he thinks that true AGI, in some sense, is going to require compositionality. It's going to require the ability to have primitives that you can then compose new programs from in situ, in real time, in order to address some sort of novel challenge. And even though I'm not saying that is life, I'm saying if you couple that ability, that compositional ability of taking primitive elements and composing new programs, and you join that, this is the key point that I think most people miss, and you join that with a need and a means for metabolic function. Again, not eating physical things necessarily, but there has to, I even put in the comments, I said life in some sense is like the economy and the economic activity required for complex systems to stabilize their form and survive. That's where I think you can have these systems truly shift their reference.
Oh, thank you very much. Very interesting indeed. Thank you, Tone. Michael.
Roland and Tone already expressed the main thing that I wanted to say, so I can be really brief. So first of all, I would not make any assumptions about what is going on 100 years from now. I'm not sure that humans will be around. At least humans in recognizable form, as we used to be. But my main point is that maybe we are overstating the role of intelligence in human affairs, at least the role of digital intelligence, as Roland suggested, and I really like this term. Intelligence as rational or logical thinking, accumulating of knowledge, and so on. So, of course, it's important when you are dealing with a problem that requires this, like engineering, scientific problem. But in human affairs, what is more important is the ability for collective action. And yes, this requires some level of knowledge sharing, but what is more important for this is the ability to agree on common goals, maybe to suspend disbelief, to agree for some sort of compromise, just for the sake of achieving some common good. And people apparently can do this, and they can do this in small groups. But at the level of the whole humankind, we very rarely demonstrate this ability. Maybe Paris Accords could be the best example of this, although it's still not perfect. And this is my big concern, that it takes time to develop this collective response or collective action. And we may not have enough time to do this, even to address a relatively slow process of climate change. And we may have even less time to address rapid development of AI. We just, I worry that we are running out of time. That's it. That's my big concern. So something will happen eventually, but maybe it will not be determined by humans. And will it be the best for humans or the best for anyone? That's an open question.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. Josh.
Yes. Let me give you my, there we go. Yeah, I wanted to address some of the things that Roland said. First about the nature. He said some interesting things about the role of emotion, and I agree that it has to do with the process of validation with respect to the consistency between actions and the response to our actions. I think of this with regard to some writing that has been done about the distinction between, for example, humans and other animals, about the role of intentionality. So this thinking goes like this, that other animals have a kind of a restricted, or what one writer called one-dimensional intentionality, where you see animals that clearly, with a dog or a duck, they appear to be goal-oriented, and they know to a particular goal. They can adjust behavior. And how do they do this? Well, that they are intentional or use intentionality means that they have expectations in terms of how things should be. So there's normative goals that they have. And with respect to those goals set up expectations. And then those expectations are put to the test in relation to what actually ensued. And they can distinguish between, whether what they expected was validated or invalidated. And so there's a contingent of writers that say we need to abandon these artificial distinctions between what's emotional or affective and what is cognitive or rational, that they're so hopelessly intertwined that it doesn't make any sense to maintain that separation. That essentially to have expectations invalidated is to be thrown into a confusion that one can't function. In other words, the maintenance of the consistency of the kind of functioning, of the patterns of functioning in relation to the environment that define a living thing as a living thing in terms of how it's self-organized, depends. Obviously depends on it being able to not find itself in situations where it's the nature of that functioning is so profoundly interrupted by the invalidation of expectations. But so in a sense, talking about affective disappointment or talking about cognitive confusion is really two aspects of the same thing. Now, the distinction between the kind of intentionality that humans have and other animals have, according to these thinkers, is that only humans have what's called two-dimensional intentionality, where we not only are able to assess how events turn out with respect to our expectations on the basis of finite goals that we have, but we're able to change the nature of those goals. So that's what makes our intentionality two-dimensional, and that's where our form of linguistic conceptuality comes into play, right? So if you think of an animal as essentially a particular animal is, and that lineage of species is continuing to, basically operate within the same kind of bubble of purposes. And then you look at the history of human culture and how purposes themselves continue to be, overthrown in favor of new purposes. Then that's a difference between the one-dimensional and the two-dimensional, forms of intentionality. But so in relation to that, well, Roland asked the question, I said, well, 100 years we'll be thinking differently. And he says, who cares? Right now we have specific, aims and specific ways of thinking, precisely. The question here is, are we sure that we're disentangling the aims and goals and concepts of our AI, of the AI that we build, and our own? That's the question. It's not whether, my point in talking about the changeability of our thinking was to point to the fact that the things that we construct are sucked into, are manifestations or expressions of the finite nature of our thinking at any given time. And I think there's a tremendous overestimation. I mean, in taking this notion of reference or reference point and the idea that, that AI can just, change its reference point, I think it's taking the notion of reference point in such a starkly isolated fashion and disconnecting it from the whole network of cultural associations with us that make sense of what it's doing and actually imbue it with the sense that it has. Only by ignoring that and pretending that, that one can understand what the reference point of a machine is in isolation from that rich cultural context, which I would argue is absolutely inseparable from what it means to say that a machine has a reference point. Only by making that artificial move can one then convince oneself that there is this independence. So the question of why can't AI evolve? Well, it does evolve. It evolves because it is an appendage of ours. So we build these machines and we interact with them. And as a result of our interacting with what the profoundly important things that they do, it changes us through our interaction with it. And then we go on to change the nature of those machines. So it's this continuous reciprocal cycle. We build, but this has been true of our relation with all of our machines, going all the way back to the wheel. It's the same thing. It's much more sophisticated what they do, but it's the same basic principle that we create a niche surrounding us. It's a technological niche. And that niche talks back to us. And the way that it talks back to us, pushes us further into more audacious thinking. And that audacious thinking leads to new innovations and new machines, and how they function in their interaction with us, spurs us on to new transformations in our society. So they're critical to human evolution. And of course, they evolve along with us because they are elements of us, like a nest to a bird or a web to a spider.
Thank you very much, Josh. Roland, and then after Roland, we're going to. We've only been at it for 3 hours, so okay.
Can we just press until morning?
It looks like we are, by the way. Okay, so
okay, so I'll try and be quick as I can. I guess when Josh was talking, I was just thinking about weather systems and how you can look at a cloud or a frontal system, and it looks on one level, or even a complex system like ocean currents that have a duration of thousands of years. And on one hand, they look like self-organizing systems. In fact, they are in some respects self-organizing because they use negative feedback in order to sustain themselves, not through some sort of volition. I'm not referring to volition. We don't need to include anything about free will here. What I'm more saying is that actually when I refer to a reference is a lot more subtle than just like some some enshrined thing that is referred to. It's more like the reference is a state of integration. If a system is able to recognize whether it is in an integrated state or it is undergoing disintegration and it can act accordingly, then the reference is a much more nebulous thing. It's like how that system's structure is responding to the influences upon it at that time. So this is why I feel the whole concept of a reference is a lot more dodgy than something that human beings can stick into a machine and go, right, that's fixed, that's not going to change or anything. You're basically dealing with something which at that level is attempting to maintain systemic integrity, and that is the reference. It is integrity. And that's why I referred earlier to the idea of continuity. If continuity is behind it, then the reference is going to change depending upon what influences are upon a system and depending upon the structure of that system and how it reorganizes itself. So I think the internal, what reference a system of that kind is working to is completely up for grabs. And whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I can't say. What it just seems to me is that it is basically quite difficult to distinguish it from life. And living things have a habit of doing unpredictable stuff and evolving in unpredictable ways. So, yeah, I'll stop there. I know it's late.
Thank you very much,
Thank
Roland.
you.
It was a very, very exciting session. Everybody was brilliant. Thank you, Tone, your first visit. I hope you come back. And everybody did, we got some very nice thoughts here and new stuff. And thank you very, very much for coming, everybody. And I'll see you next time. Be well.
Thank you.